What did you make of these illegal beach parties?
Well, it's just irresponsible. I can't believe that anybody in January 2021 isn't aware of the risks, and they certainly were warned that these sort of gatherings would be dispersed by the police if they were breaching public health orders, and that's exactly what they did, and it's exactly what happened. And I'd like to pay tribute to the police for the work that they did. They used their discretion yesterday. Very difficult circumstances given the weather and given, of course, the tension that has built up over 12 months of some of these restrictions, which are just completely foreign to Australians who love to get together. But I think what we saw yesterday was a small minority of people doing the wrong thing, and I think what we saw was a very, very professional New South Wales police force responding accordingly.
Any fines?
Yeah, there were fines, and one fine, given the amount of public information that's been released, is one fine too many. But in the Domain, there were 4 arrests at the protest, and then there was a separate one of a man just misbehaving and trying to cause trouble not far from the protest. The overall numbers will be collated over the course of today, but the police briefed me this morning, and the numbers are well down on the usual habitual behaviour over Australia Day compared to previous years. But as I said, I mean, we've got more than just the normal risks associated to community gatherings this year. We've also got a pandemic, and nobody wants to go back into lockdown. And the reasons why we have these health orders is to minimise the risk of that happening.
Yeah. So were any fines issued in relation to these illegal beach parties? We're seeing these pictures, and there were warnings from the likes of yourself leading up to it. So did police issue fines for these people who gathered illegally?
Well, not the one at Lilli Pilli, because as soon as the gathering saw police approaching, they dispersed.
Right.
Now that says to me they knew they were doing the wrong thing, but police know who they are. And of course, these records are kept, and I would hate to think that we'll see a repeat of it over the course of this summer. And people just need to realise we had to sit with this one out, and let's come back bigger and better next year. I mean, the police more than anybody want to see people getting back to enjoy their lives, because the mental health and the anxiety and of course the concerns that are raised in communities when these sort of restrictions are imposed create more problems for the police than they would normally have.
And what about the Bondi one?
Well, Bondi again. I'm not aware of any pins issued, any infringement notices just yet. But that police, they use their discretion, but they also reserve the right to issue fines if they believe that it's warranted. But again, the vast majority of these gatherings did comply. The vast majority of landowners, and the beaches are the custodians of the beaches are normally the councils, and they worked very well with police over the course of yesterday. Surf Lifesaving, however, did have a busy day yesterday. The number of drownings so far to date is actually higher than we've had before, and that's very, very unfortunate. So it's not just the public health orders that we're concerned about at the moment. It's actually complete disregard for individual safety, and that puts an unnecessary risk on surf lifesaving here in New South Wales.
Okay, you did touch on this, but when it comes to the Invasion Day protest, there were a couple of arrests, but on the whole, most people did do the right thing. Are you relieved about that? And the ability of police and the people who were there protesting, for the most part, were able to function normally?
Well, they were. And when you look at the statistics over the course of the protest that happened yesterday, I mean, that's an annual event. That protest gathering occurs every year. Usually it sees a crowd of about 15,000. So the fact that we had just shy of 3,000 yesterday, I think was a good outcome. I think the majority of people did heed the warning. Police did arrest 4 people. They were all in their 20s. They were people that had failed to comply with public health orders, one hindering police. I think there might have been one assault police there as well. One constable did receive very minor injuries. So it is unnecessary. It's only small. These statistics are good. They're pleasing. But as I've always said, that one charge is one too many, and it is just a waste of police resources. I mean, you've seen the activities around the state, and yet police had to deploy yesterday into the Domain. They did, of course, disperse before midday, which was again another concern to us, because the heat meant that that sort of gathering without the appropriate first aid support was always going to be a risk for disaster. So I'm delighted that the police were able to negotiate, ensure that the march didn't go ahead, and then the crowd was dispersed as quickly as possible.
Just on to COVID and restrictions, Minister. 9th consecutive day it was yesterday in New South Wales without any new cases. Is it time to ease restrictions further?
Well, the Premier will make those announcements over the course of today. She'll obviously have the Cabinet Subcommittee this morning, and those decisions will be made. We are very cautious. I mean, you've just reported on Sky how the United Kingdom's got 100,000 deaths. I mean, proportionate to population, that means that we should have about 40,000. We don't. We've got a small percentage of that. So we've done very, very well comparatively. And when you look at the similar demographic between the United Kingdom and Australia, the government's response here has been fantastic. I mean, if we were the United Kingdom, proportionally, we'd be seeing about 1,000 people a week die, and we haven't seen that at all. So I'm not uncomfortable with the way that these restrictions have been managed. Do I hate wearing masks? Yes, everybody hates wearing masks. Do I hate the fact that the pubs have had to restrict the numbers compared to there was pre-Avalon? Yes, I'm concerned about that too. But we should pat ourselves on the back. And yes, the Premier has indicated that there will be an easing of restrictions, but we won't be rushing into anything if the health advice says to the contrary. But I want your listeners and you to know that nobody wants to see these restrictions eased more than members of the New South Wales Cabinet. I can assure you of that.
OK, I guess the flip side of that will be the testing numbers. There were just 7,000 right across the state yesterday. Is that good enough?
Well, we have to always consider that this was essentially for the majority of Australians a long weekend, and you don't expect people to come out on the sort of holiday that we've seen over the course of the last 4 days. And the other thing is, you've got to realise, I mean, if people don't have symptoms, they're not going to get tested. Sure. And that's a silver lining to the dark cloud. Yes, the numbers are low, but I mean, I haven't had a test because I've never had a symptoms, whereas I've got members of my family that've had 2 tests because they've had symptoms. And so I think that I don't want to necessarily say that to people that this is a disappointing figure. What I do say to anybody that does have a symptoms, they're encouraged to get a test. And if that means that we have 40,000 tests in one day, well, so be it. I'm glad that we're being cautious.
Are you worried about the virus turning up in a sewage plant in southwest Sydney?
Well, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know necessarily what that says to the health department, other than the fact that there has been obviously an outbreak. And I'm told, but this is probably a question for the health minister and the chief medical officer, but I'm told that anybody that's had the virus can still have that in their system, even if they've passed the 14 days and they've been cleared of the virus. But any indication of the virus being present in our community is of concern, which is why that if you've got even the mildest symptoms, you should get tested.